Hi all, welcome. This is the CAE seminar series for spring, and I'm very delighted to introduce our speaker, Dr. Lingzhen Li, who's a postdoc at Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Dr. Li received his bachelor, master, and PhD degrees at Hunan University, Tongji University, and ETH Zurich/EMPA. His investigations focused on strengthening steel structures using advanced materials such as iron-based shape memory alloy and carbon fiber reinforced polymer. He joined HKTU as a postdoctoral fellow in January 2024, and he there works on analysis and design of connectors for very large floating structures. His research interests include bonding, debonding mechanisms, fatigue and fracture of steel, structural strengthening, and dynamic response of floating structures. In this talk, he is going to discuss prestressed bonding, Fe-SMA strengthening system from bonding interface to strengthen structures. So thank you very much, Dr. Lee. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Pranoy, for your introduction and invitation for me to join this seminar. It's a pleasure for me to introduce my previous work at ETH Zurich and EMPA in Switzerland. This presentation would involve the majority of my PhD work and some related collaborative works. The presentation would be very similar to my doctoral defense, which happened at the end of August last year. But I revised the title of this presentation. It is now as Prestressed bonded iron-based shape memory alloy strengthening system from the bonding interfaces to strengthen the structures. Yeah, here's the pointer for better visualization. My name is Lingzhen Li, in Chinese as Li Lingzhen. During my PhD work, I had two supervisors. A ETH supervisor was Professor Eleni Hatzi. My EMPA supervisor was Professor Ilias Gavary, who was a project leader at EMPA, a Swiss Federal Laboratory for Material Science and Technology, and he joined the University of Leibniz Hanover in Germany 1 year ago. The background of this PhD work is that metallic structures around the world, many of them are suffering from fatigue and fracture problems. Here are examples of civil structure, and here is another bridge, not only in our civil engineering field, but also in the aviation field and associated fields. Fatigue and fracture damage for metallic material is very common. Here is a schematic view of those typical damage. Fatigue damage, over deflection, if they are combined with corrosion, etc., the problems are even more severe. What we can do with those problems, we have generally two sorts of solutions. The first is simply to replace the damaged structure member and put a new one there. The problem would be solved at the structure level and also the material level. However, such a solution has a very clear disadvantage. Example, for bridge structures, local traffic would be blocked. This would create some disadvantage for social, local society and economy. Instead, we could leave the damaged structure member there, but doing some strengthening or repair. The problem at the material level still exists, but at the structure level, we could solve the problem and make the structure under runnable situation. There are a lot of techniques for structure repair and strengthening for not only steel structure, but also concrete structure, etc. In my PhD work, I used a material called iron-based shape memory alloy, for short as Fe-SMA, for such a bonded prestressed strengthening. First of all, what is this material? First of all, what is this material? This figure shows a typical stress-strain behavior of iron-based shape memory alloy, Fe-SMA. After unloading, it features a typical residual stress, which comprises two terms. The first is a plastic strain. The second is a phase transformation strain. For traditional steel material like mild steel or high-strength steel, this is the end of the behavior. But for our shape memory alloy, this phase transformation strain can be fully recovered at a heating to a certain temperature. And this phenomenon is called the shape memory effect, as if it remembers its original shape. And we can use this special property shrinking during heating for prestressed strengthening. Here is a schematic example. As we previously mentioned, for existing steel structures, problems would exist. But if we bond a pre-strand shape memory alloy, which is stress-free, to the target location and hit a center part, it tries to shrink, if you remember the shape memory effect. However, the parent structure limits its deformation. Therefore, tension is generated in the shape memory alloy. To balance this tensile force, a compression is generated in the parent structure. This compression would help us to close the existing crack in existing structure. Not only this technique can improve the fatigue and structural performance, but it can also do the deformation control, etc. Such a strengthening purpose could also be realized by traditional prestressed techniques, such as prestressed steel tandem or prestressed CFRP. CFRP here means carbon fiber reinforced polymer. But this shape memory alloy bonded strengthening has a unique advantage. Here is an example of orthotropic steel bridge. There is a lot of opening holes and geometric discontinuity, and the fatigue cracks typically occurs in these details. This is not a secret. Nearly everywhere around the world, fatigue problem occur in such a structure type. Traditional pre-stressed strengthening techniques cannot be applied here or can very, very hardly be applied here. Our bonded Fe-SMA strengthening can work. My colleagues and I already tried at the lab level. We bond short shape memory alloy patches, example, 100 millimeter long or 200 millimeters long, and hit a center part, example, bond a patch here and hit it. Prestress is generated, and the generated prestress help us to close the crack, and the strengthening is done. But prior to my PhD work, the knowledge in this field was very in lack, and there was only one published work in this field. So my supervisor and we designed these objectives to understand such a strengthening technique. First of all, we tried to understand the bond behavior in this bonded anchorage zone. Excuse me, one very important concept I forgot to mention. Using such a bonded Fe-SMA strengthening technique, we have a concept called partial heating activation. The idea is that we heat only the center part to generate prestress, and the remaining two ends remain unheated and transfer the prestress to the parent structure. Okay, the first objective was to understand the bonded anchorage zone. Then we know that the adhesive bond, it has a strong temperature dependency. So the activation temperature might influence the bonding property between shape memory alloy and steel substrate. So the second objective was to understand how the activation temperature would influence the bond behavior here. Afterwards, we would have to understand the structural behavior after such a bonded prestressed strengthening. In the very end, I conducted a pilot application using such a strengthening technique for fatigue strengthening of steel plate with central field thickness crack. Let's start from the first objective. Here is a typical lab share sample of mine, shape memory alloy strip bonded by adhesive, this thin layer, to the top of a wide steel plate. The general procedure was that first I used acetone to clean the bonding interface, bonding surface, then use sandblasting to remove the oxidized layer, and also to create some roughness for a better bonding property. Afterwards, acetone cleaning again, then apply adhesive, curing for 2 weeks or more. Here I used two types of shape memory alloy. The blue one, the red one represents a non-prestressed shape memory alloy. The blue one is prestressed. They are stress-free when they are bonded. The difference is that if there is a residual strain, even though they are the same material, but with a different residual strain states. In modeling, they can be regarded as two different materials because they have a different stress-strain behavior. And I used the three types of adhesives, whose stress-strain behavior are shown here. The Sika dual adhesive is known as a linear adhesive, which is a bit brittle. Sika Power 1277 and Aradite 2015 are known as nonlinear adhesives. They have clear nonlinear stress-strain behavior, and they have much higher friction energy. After curing of this specimen, the steel plate was clamped here, and the extension side of the memory alloy was held by the mechanical clamp and tensioned here by the hydraulic jack. During test, I had the LVDT to measure the loading speed, and a computer here controls the loading speed so that the test could be conducted in a displacement controlled manner. The purpose was to allow for a gradual debonding in the bond line, and we could analyze the gradual debonding behavior. During the test, here I also prepared the DIC black and white speckles, which is not shown here. And during the test, two DIC cameras was capturing a picture here for later processing of the full field displacement and the full field strain of my specimens. Here is one typical two-dimensional strain contour. The contour wasn't straight, but curved. This means the strain state and the stress state in the shape memory alloy feature a typical membrane stress state. This brought some difficulty for us to analyze the bond behavior hidden by the shape memory alloy. So I used a technique called Gauss integral. The idea is that if these contours are exact parabolic shape, then the strain values on these two Gauss points reflect the exact integral. If it doesn't follow a exact parabolic shape, such a Gauss integral could also approximate very well the strain integral behavior, so that we could simplify the 2D strain problem to a 1D problem. During the DIC measurement, we have the full field displacement measurement, which can be simplified to a one-dimensional displacement location behavior. Integrated in the DIC software, we can analyze the strain location behavior. Substitute the measured one-dimensional stress strain behavior into this strain location behavior. We have the simplified one-dimensional stress location behavior. And further analyzing the equilibrium of the shape memory alloy infinitesimal element, we can obtain the shear stress location behavior. The last step was to correlate the shear stress location behavior with the shear slip location behavior measured in the first step. We have the shear slip behavior of the bond line. This is an animation of the analyzed experimental behavior. As the force increases, the tensile stress, tensile strain of the shape memory alloy, also the shear stress in the adhesive bond, they increase. But once the force enters the plateau, which means the bond capacity is reached and damage happens in the adhesive line, both all the tensile stress profile, tensile strain profile, and the shear stress profile, they didn't change shape, but propagated from the loaded end to the free end. This shows only the full range behavior of, excuse me, maybe this way. This shows the full range behavior of one of my specimens. I in total conducted 24 such lab shear specimens with different memory alloy type and adhesive type, adhesive thickness, etc. I observed a very similar phenomenon and acquired huge amount of data. But we are engineers. We cannot say that for every strengthening project, we conduct a group of tests and use those measured experimental behavior for our design of bonded strengthening. Therefore, we need model to describe and predict the behavior in the bond line. Prior to my PhD work, there were already a lot of behavior investigating the bond line and also this lab shear behavior, especially in the field of CFRP bonded, unbonded strengthening. But there is a major difference of my case and the previous cases. CFRP is typically known as a typical linear elastic material, but our shape memory alloy features a typical nonlinear stress strain behavior, which brought some difficulties for applying the CFRP bonded model to my case. Therefore, I built my own lab shear model. Here, I assumed a sufficient long bond length so that the load at the right-hand side doesn't introduce any shear deformation and shear stress at the free end. Here is the boundary condition. Here, at a arbitrary location xi, the slip is written as Si. Tensile strain in the adherent strip is written as epsilon I. I considered compatibility written here, the equilibrium of adherent strip, and also the fracture behavior in the bond line. Here I need to introduce in the bond slip behavior, the area covered by the bond slip curve is known as the fracture energy. The fracture energy is the energy required to create new surfaces in the adhesive bond. But when the adhesive is not fully damaged, which means only a part of the energy is dissipated, truncated at an arbitrary slip, I call this fracture energy as a partial fracture energy, which is written in this equation. By combining the compatibility equation, equilibrium equation, and the partial fracture energy equation, we have this updated new equation. I call it a key equation in my study. It is very elegant and useful because it links the fracture behavior in the bond line, the left-hand side, and right-hand side, the stress-strain behavior of the adherent strip. So far, in this model, I didn't introduce any stress-strain behavior. This means such a model is very general. It can not only describe the behavior of shape memory alloy bonded joints, but also FRP bonded joint, etc. Further further deriving this model a bit, we would have several practical functions. Due to time limitation, I wouldn't go deep into details, but show you some of the key results. The first function is a prediction of the bond capacity. The two curves are my model prediction. The solid red of bonded joint with the pre-strained SMA, the blue curve with non-pre-strained SMA. The dots are my experimentally measured results. We see that the experimental results are distributed around my model prediction. The second function is we could analyze the bond sleep behavior directly from the measured force displacement behavior. Here I show you an example. During the lab shear test, we could measure the force displacement behavior as shown in this red curve. Substitute this data in my model. Within one shot, we could obtain the local bond sleep behavior shown as this red curve. Or the other way, if we already know the bond sleep behavior in the bond line, we can simplify it to a specific shape. This is for the easier analytical solution. Then substitute this simplified bond sleep behavior into the inverse of my model. Within one shot again, we could analyze the force displacement behavior. If you're not so interested in the case of shape memory alloy bond, I would show you a further example of steel bonded to concrete. I used some experimental data of my colleague Bernhard Schranz at AMPA. Here is a schematic plot of shape memory alloy rebar embedded in concrete. In many of the standards around the world, like ASTM and also FIB, FIB means International Federation of Concrete. The typical methods to measure the bond behavior between steel and concrete is that we use a short bond, which is typically 5 times as the rebar diameter, and measure the force displacement behavior. Then the shear stress is calculated as a shear stress tensile force divided by the rebar perimeter and the bond length, so that we could have this average bond sleep behavior. My colleague Bernhard Schranz, he measured 3 local average bond sleep behavior shown as the dashed blue curves. Then he measured bond sleep, the force displacement behavior of two joints with longer bond length, 800 millimeters long. Then how to infer the bond sleep behavior with the long bond cases. First of all, he developed his numerical model with bond sleep behavior as input and the force displacement behavior as the output. During test, he measured force displacement curves, and he used different bond sleep input and see which force displacement could fit his experimental measurement better. In the end, he summarized such a black 3-stage bond sleep curve based on trial and error simulation. But if using my model, we just need the force displacement behavior of bonded joint with long bond length and the stress strain behavior of the FES of the steel rebar or SMA rebar. Then within one shot, I can analyze the bond sleep behavior, local bond sleep behavior, shown as this red curve and the blue curve, which is very similar to the analysis result of my colleague Bernhardt. Okay, so far we have gained some amount of knowledge in the bounded anchorage zone. Then, how was the influence of the activation temperature and generated prestress on the adhesive bond? I designed such a activation setup based on this lab shear model with local activation. In this special setup, copper clamps allowed electricity entered shape memory alloy from this location, going through the shape memory alloy and goes out from this location. Only the center part of the shape memory alloy strip was heated and generated with prestress. After some analysis and post-processing, I found that for global force displacement behavior, for joints without activation or with temperature activation, their curves are very similar. Similarly, when I looked into the local bond sleep behavior, I found those bond sleep behavior without activation or with heating activation, their behaviors are very similarly. This suggests that we could use the bond behavior or joint behavior without activation to represent those with activation. This would help us to simplify the testing procedure and the analysis procedure. But what's the reason behind? Further analysis told me that the fracture energy in the bond line was really influenced by the activation temperature. First, it increased, but after a certain threshold, it decreased, means there was some heating damage in the adhesive bond. However, if you remember my model prediction for the bond capacity, at the range of the used interfacial fracture energy, the bond capacity is not sensitive to the change of the fracture energy. As a result, we observed that the bond capacity is nearly a constant over the range of the activation temperature, from room temperature to 260 degrees C. This further suggests that for joints with temperature activation, we could use the bond behavior or joint force displacement behavior of joints without activation. Now, we gain some knowledge in the bounded anchorage zone, also some behavior in the activation zone. It's time for us to jump out and analyze the structure member strengthened by this bonded shape memory alloy strengthening technique. After we bond prestressed prestrand memory alloy strip, we add some additional stiffness to structure member. This is called the passive strengthening, whose effective is limited. But after generating prestress, the strengthening is more efficient. In the model analysis, I had two basic assumptions. The first is that the activation zone, the adhesive was fully soft during activation because the activation temperature was as high as 180 or 260 degrees C. At this temperature, most of the adhesive lose their loading stiffness. And the second assumption was that in the bonded anchorage zone, the adhesive bond was not influenced by the activation temperature at all. But in reality, there is a short distance which allows the activation temperature reduce to the room temperature. I observed this during activation test, but in the simulation, I ignored such a small zone. Further, in the analysis, I considered the generated prestress, the shear deformation of adhesive bond, and the compressive bending deformation of the substrate. In the end, the model could successfully predict the strain of substrate caused by the generated prestress, also the deflection of substrate. These two figures shows the modeling results versus experimental measurement. Even though this model was derived based on strengthening for steel structures, but I also tried validation on strengthened glass structures and strengthened concrete structures. Most of data showed supported the derived model apart from these two dots. I have to say that these two gray dots with the huge arrow contain some deficient experimental design in my cases. But the rest dots, nearly 20 dots, supported the accuracy and the efficiency of the model prediction. Okay, we are, I mean, the structures after strengthening, they have to be subjected to some load. Example, bridges subjected to traffic load and some towers subjected to wind load. Therefore, after strengthening, analysis of the applied pre-stress, etc., is not the end. Therefore, I conducted some test at the lab level. I call it a pilot strengthening project, fatigue strengthening using bonded Fe-SMA strips. Here is a steel plate with a central through thickness crack, which is hidden by this crack opening gauge. I used the 4 shape memory alloy strips for strengthening of each steel plate, 2 on the front side, 2 at the back side. At the center region, memory alloy strips were heated to generate pre-stress, and 2 bonded anchorage zones remain unheated and transfer the pre-stress to the substrate. Here is at the end of fatigue test. The steel plate was fully cracked. A crack went through the cross section here, but we see that 4 Fe-SMA strips remain holding substantial tensile force and linking the cracked 2 parts of steel plate. This figure shows the fatigue testing results of 5 samples. Here, this gray one is a reference steel plate with central through thickness crack, but not strengthened. It had fatigue crack propagation at the load level of 75 megapascal delta sigma. After strengthening, all specimens survived at this load level. Minimum a load level of 90 megapascal was required to drive the existing fatigue crack to propagate. And through the test, we found that a higher activation temperature has better strengthening efficiency. This not only the test result supported, told us that higher activation temperature brought a better strengthening efficacy, but also a pre-stress analysis model, which was shown in previous slide, plus a fatigue analysis model, they are able to predict whether a fatigue crack here propagate at a certain level. These two models combined could be used for fatigue strengthening of existing structure using our bonded strengthening Fe-SMA technique. So here comes to the major conclusions. In this PhD work, I conducted a systematic investigation on shape memory alloy to steel bond behavior from the material level to component level, which means bonded joint, to finally the structural level. They include the tests and the models. I used innovative post-processing technique to analyze the experimental lab shear behavior. I developed innovative analytical models to predict bond capacity and also to analyze the bond sleeve behavior directly from the measured force displacement behavior. Afterwards, I analyzed the bond behavior after activation and found it can be replaced by bond behavior without activation, even though in the very local mechanical level, there is some difference. But for engineering application, the global force displacement behavior, etc., the difference is negligible. In the end, I proposed a model and conducted tests to analyze the strengthening, the efficacy of the strengthening system. This model can predict the pre-stress level accurately in terms of the compressive strength induced in the parent structure as well as the deformation of a substrate structure. Here, I guess I have a few more minutes, right? Hello?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, thank you. I wish to take this chance to again thank my supervisors and colleagues. This is Professor Eleni Hatzi at ETH Zurich. This is Professor Elias Gaffari, formerly at EMPA and now in University Hanover in Germany. They supported me a lot. And my PhD colleagues at EMPA, PhD colleagues at ETH Zurich. Here is a picture of all members at EMPA, Bauhalle. Bauhalle is a German term, means construction hall. And my PhD work was sponsored, or was partly sponsored by the China Scholarship Council, which is very much appreciated. In the end, last but not least, my industrial partners, reefer company provided all the shape memory alloy materials. Huntsman, Switzerland, and Sika, Switzerland, they provided all the adhesive materials. Not only providing materials, engineers in these three companies, they had the discussions, meeting with me, helping me to better understand those materials, designing the experiment, etc. Again, I guess I have some more minutes. It would be very quick, associated the collaborative work. Collaborating with the steel research group at ETH Zurich, led by Professor Andreas Taras, we investigated the bond behavior between iron-based shape memory alloy and the glass structure. We found that the bond behavior here is very similar to those between shape memory alloy and the steel material. Collaborating with Professor Leroy Gardner in Imperial College London, together with Dr. Huang Cheng, a friend of mine, we investigated the fatigue behavior of 3D printed steel called VAM steel. We found out that the fatigue behavior of this material results shown as blue, the green dots and the red dots. The fatigue behavior are very similar to those of traditional steel material in butt welded joints, whose results are shown as the gray backgrounds. Yeah, again, thank you. Here's the end of the presentation. If you have questions or whatever.